Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are back with another episode of Daily Palantir, and folks, we've got to respond to a new article on Palantir. Now, if you've been in the Palantir community for a while, you are no stranger to the fact that the media has a particular perception of Palantir, and they try to impose that perspective based on the way they think Palantir operates. There was the Vice 2017-2018 era in terms of how they covered Palantir and their work with immigration and ICE in the United States. Then there was the 2022 era, early 2022, when Palantir first put in the bid to become the winner of the NHS Federated Data Platform contract. We ended up winning that contract. The British public, the British media, certain sources like Open Democracy were basically saying Palantir was the most evil company in the world and that they were going to steal all the data of the UK citizens. That didn't end up happening. It was actually false. You could argue that that was just pure propaganda. So if you've been a Palantir shareholder, you are no stranger to the fact that there are usually articles that come out around Palantir. Today, actually, the Free Press put out a video of Karp talking from the Q4 or the Q1 earnings call, and they highlighted a 60-second clip of him saying that the West is good and we should defend those values. So, like, you've got some new media sources showing Karp and Palantir in a positive light. The far majority of them have been negative. Today, we're responding to another article that came out around Palantir from The Guardian, an article that I think didn't really get a lot of the facts correct about the event that they went to that I was also at, the AI Expo event in DC. And then the overall tone of the article, I have a counter narrative and counter approach to that article. So I'm going to take the time in this video to spend answering that article and basically giving my counter perspective on how I think the journalist doesn't really understand the depth of what Karp is saying, which is why the arguments they portray aren't necessarily the best either. Another day, another Palantir article. Let's get into it. Okay, so first thing I want to start off with is the fact that I tried to respond to this journalist in good faith by actually messaging them on Twitter to see if they wanted to respond, and they ended up really not responding. So here is the journalist, and this is the article they put out with the link. We'll get into the depth of the article, but they basically said it was the title is My Surreal Soul-Sucking Day at Palantir's First AI Warfare Conference. I said, hello, Carolyn. Would you be willing to come on my channel and have a friendly debate about the claims you made in your article? I'm a Palantir investor. Would love to be open to, discussing with someone else who has a negative opinion of the company. She did not respond to this. I'm pretty sure she saw it because, other people saw it, and she did not respond to my message either. Some of the comments in her post said, why would a journalist debate an investor? My response was, if you're a journalist, the entire goal is to have an open exchange of ideas. By the way, I consider myself a journalist, a content creator. You can call it whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, we're in the business of spreading ideas, and I didn't know it's wrong to talk about ideas, much less defend ideas against opposition when someone says, hey, I have a different opposing view. Do you want to come talk about it? But yeah, they chose just not to respond to what I said. All right, so let's get into this article. There's two parts of it that I think didn't make that much sense. One was about the technicalities of the event itself, and the second was more about the framing of the article. So let's get into this. In Palantir's main booth, I tried on a VR headset to test Palantir's new augmented reality tool for soldiers. I was told I'd be able to direct a truck or drone while continuing to see the world around me, but when I put on the headset, my field of vision became shaky and out of focus. It reminded me of goggles they made us wear during the DARE anti-drug programs in middle school meant to simulate being drunk. Many people had been trying on the headset that day. A Palantir employee explained to me in order for you to see things clearly, the headset has to fit your head and eyes perfectly. He didn't offer to adjust the headset, so my high-tech soldier vision remained out of focus. Okay, a couple things there that don't make a lot of sense. Number one, I was at the event. You have to be registered to get an invite to use the IC2 mixed reality headset. Why? There were a lot of different demos Palantir was doing, a bunch of different demos showing you supply chains, logistics, energy, different stuff. That IC2 demo was something that you actually had to register and be able to use and be invited for. Now, she was not registered as a journalist. She was just, I guess, walking around the booth trying to figure out which information she could get. And which is why probably she didn't get the actual help she needed to use the headset in a meaningful way. I'm speaking from my experience. When I used the event, I had 3 employees walk me through everything I was seeing, looking at everything. Arnie can speak on this as well because Arnie was at the event and he used the headset. And it was a pretty damn good product from my perspective. I mean, from how I think about just in general mixed reality, the Vision Pro and whatever consumer use case there is, like watch a movie or something on that headset, whatever Palantir is building in regards to the software that can be used on the battlefield and in commercial applications like with Panasonic Energy, there's way more use cases with that software. And what I saw was a simulation of something going on in Taiwan, which is way more effective in my opinion than whatever she's talking about. So if the headset didn't fit her correctly, it's probably because she wasn't invited to use that and she was just doing it on her own, which is why she didn't get the value of the product itself. Now, here's another thing she said that I thought was just really weird, dude. On the evening of the first day, Palantir had a social event with free drinks. The only options were 2 IPAs and one was called The Corruption. It was bar none the worst beverage I had in my entire life. So she starts complaining about the drinks at an event. A journalist that's supposed to be covering the ethics of how we understand war and defense technology is complaining about a drink at the event. This just already showed me that this is just a very weird approach to critiquing Palantir, which, by the way, was the largest sponsor at the event, which means they had the biggest booth. Instead of actually looking at their demos, the presentations, talking about how they're using LLMs, nope. Well, the drink wasn't that good. I was like, okay, that's fine. I ended up talking to a Canadian man named Sata, who appeared to be in his mid-20s. He was an investor in Palantir, so I asked how he had gotten the money. I got in a car accident, he said. After getting a small payout, he invested. So far, he said he had made money from the investment, but lost money on the trip. This also, I thought, was just insanity, dude. Sata, shout out to him if you're watching this video right now. He actually flew down from Canada to see me because he knew I would be at the event. I didn't even know who he was, but he's been an OG supporter of the channel. And to try to see Karp speak at the event as well. The reason he was able to invest in Palantir at some low levels is because he got into an unfortunate accident at work. As a result, he got a payout from that accident, dumped it into Palantir, and he's been able to make some money. So it's so funny. The journalist is like, well, he's made money on the investment, but he's lost money coming to the event. It's like, yeah, you're going to lose money when you take a flight down. So it's like, yeah, that's negative money leaving your bank account. But the entire framing of this and almost acting as if, this random dude that was able to put in money at a good price because he was able to get a settlement from his job is like somehow a bad investor or doesn't deserve to be. It was just such a weird framing in the beginning of the article for what she's trying to do. And it set up the tone of her just not being happy with the event or the conference, which I think is a small minority of people. In fact, maybe she's the only person on the planet, because everyone that I saw at the event that actually got to use Palantir products and got to talk to the Palantir employees, they were pretty damn amazed at what Palantir was doing at this event. Okay, now second, let's talk about some issues with the article itself. So let's read a little bit from here and then I'll give my response to it. She says, he being Karp, by saying that the U.S. had to scare our adversaries to death in war, referring to the 7th October attacks on Israel from Hamas. He said if what had happened to them had happened to us, there would be a hole in the ground somewhere. Members of the audience laughed when he mocked fresh graduates of Columbia University. He said they'd have a hard time on the job market and described their views as a pagan religion infecting our universities. A huge aspect of war and democracy, Karp went on to argue, is leaders successfully arguing or selling that war domestically. If we lose the intellectual debate, you will not be able to deploy any armies in the West ever. Now, she then ends up saying, earlier in the panel, General Milley, had said that the modern war involved conflict in dense urban areas with high levels of collateral damage, clearly alluding to the war in Gaza, but too afraid to say it. But every time Karp spoke, Milley became more bombastic. By the panel's end, he was describing Americans who opposed the war in Gaza as supporting a terrorist organization. Meanwhile, Eric Schmidt, who's the former CEO of Google, mainly talked about the importance of drones and automation. He is quietly trying to start his own war drone company. If you read the rest of the article and you go through the tone of the article, she then goes on to say it was a soul-sucking experience. She says she was walking around as if, she couldn't understand what was happening and how people were thinking about the event as if they had no problem. This one paragraph right here shows you when she says, all around me, I overheard upbeat conversation between hundreds of people who had just heard the same things I had. Easygoing comments about lunch traveler the next panel. I felt like we were living on a different world. It was frankly jarring to hear a recent top U.S. official defend Israel's mass killing of Gaza civilians by evoking wartime massacres that not only preceded the Geneva Conventions, but helped justify their creation. The prevailing attitude of the conference was when systems fail, it just means you need newer technology and more of it. Now, I believe that she didn't actually understand the crux of what was argued at this event. And as a result of that, I think the article didn't really get to what Palantir is trying to do. And so this is where I want to set my arguments up in regards to the response I have to this article. At a high level, I think the journalist doesn't understand the role of defense technology, why defense technology is important, how systems of capitalism intertwine with war and defense tech, and what we need to do in order to protect ourselves in order to remain safe as a society. The simple argument being, Karp says, we are the peace activists and the protesters are those that want war. The very basic premise to this analysis, if you look at it in the context of defense tech, Palantir, software, AI, is if you want to prevent a war, you need to be prepared for when a war happens. The whole concept of nuclear weapons are so we have mutually assured destruction. The reason China doesn't send a nuke first is because they know the US will send a nuke back and then everyone dies. And so at some level, as crazy and as irrational the world is, there is a level of understanding that, hey, we need to protect ourselves because we need to make sure they don't attack us. And if they do attack us, they need to know what happens if they attack us. That is why General Milley, who was at the event and at the conference, was saying the things we did in Japan during World War II is, uncomparable almost to the blind eye when you think of what's happening with Israel and Hamas. The amount of people that we killed, but we have the audacity as an American public to criticize Israel for what they're doing in Gaza. Now, you can have whatever opinion you want on Israel, Gaza, the Israeli government. I'm sure Karp doesn't agree with every single thing the Israeli government does. However, at some level, there's a basic principle of the organization that launched terrorist attacks on October 7th in Israel, in their charter, Hamas, says that the elimination of Jews should take place, that Jewish people should not exist. That's why General Milley said, hey, if you're supporting these people, you're supporting a terrorist organization. She goes on to frame the article, and this is, again, the sort of argument, the problem I have with the article is all of our arguments come from this perspective of these guys are evil. General Milley is evil. Alex Karp is evil. So everyone else is fine, but Palantir is evil. These war generals are evil, and the reason they're evil is because they're saying, hey, if you support an organization and you're protesting for the freedom of an organization that says we should kill Jewish people, maybe you should think twice about that. General Milley was like, maybe you're supporting a terrorist organization. This journalist is like, I actually know. General Milley is a warmongering, horrible person. Alex Karp, all he wants is war because he's saying we probably shouldn't support Hamas. And that context of the article is, I think, the problem with the perspectives that she ultimately presented. The argument in the article was Palantir is an evil war machine that just wants the world to die and to be able to make profit and money. This is where she connects Thiel and Trump and all this stuff. And everyone else is fine. Everyone else has no problem. Everyone else is just trying to live, a happy fantasy reality, and Palantir is the one messing it up. I believe, and this is probably the reason why she didn't want to come talk to me on the show or even discuss these ideas, I believe these are claims that have no warrants and they're rooted in bad faith. And I think when you listen to someone like Karp talk, by the way, in 2015, when I was a kid, I believed the same things that this journalist believed. Capitalism is evil. There's this big industrial military complex and everyone wants to kill everyone just to make money. Like, as you get older, you start realizing, wait a second, the reason I have free speech is because America fought for those freedoms. The reason I, am allowed to say, hey, I don't like Donald Trump or I don't like Joe Biden and I don't get my head chopped off by the government because there's no Sharia law governing our society is because we actually have, even if not perfect, but we do have some level of democracy. And you had to fight and defend yourself to maintain that right. Is everything in defense tech and defense spending ethical and okay? Obviously not. There's nuances to everything. But at the very core, the argument in the article was that this was a soul-sucking event because Karp gets on stage and says we have to scare the living shit out of our adversaries. Why does he say that? So that a Hamas, which would probably never try to do anything like they did in Israel in the United States because they know what would happen if they did that to the United States. They feel the liberty to do it in Israel. And why did they feel the liberty? How did they get the ability to execute that attack? Karp's argument is like, this is a problem with defense. This is something that uniquely software can resolve. Does he sell software? Yes. Is he biased to an extent? Yes. But he's also saying, hey, well, wait a second. Every time there's been a problem nationally, domestically, geopolitically, internationally, Palantir has run to the problem. When the war in Ukraine breaks out, Palantir runs to the problem, doesn't care about making money, gives them the software. When this thing in Israel happens, when the attack in Israel happens, Palantir runs to the problem. COVID, whether or not you liked the vaccine or didn't want to take it or did take it, Palantir was powering the distribution, the software that was necessary for you to be able to get a vaccine. Someone who wears 17,000 masks on their face and feels that the pandemic was the most important thing on the planet doesn't realize that the only reason they got the vaccine was because a company actually cared about the software and the real-time readiness necessary to be able to execute the delivery of the life-changing vaccines that certain people felt that they needed to take. So from that perspective, the very bias of this journalist, as I'm thinking about Palantir and software's role in humanity and maintaining democratic Western values, is that that person denies the very fabric of how you get to your freedoms in the first place. That person is hypocritical, journalists like the journalists of this Guardian article, and the reason they're hypocritical is because, quite frankly, in my opinion, they take a lot of their freedoms for granted and don't want to know the truth of how you got to those freedoms. CodeStrap, a good friend of the channel, a big member in the Palantir community, he shared a post today, and I want to end off with this post because I think it kind of highlights what issue we're having right now in society in regards to the people that think the way in which this journalist thinks. So this is a quote from Sam Harris that CodeStrap reposted today. And I want to read a little bit of this. Of course, the boundary between anti-Semitism and generic moral stupidity is a little hard to discern, and I'm not sure that it is always important to find it. I'm not sure it matters why a person can't distinguish between collateral damage in a necessary war and conscious acts of genocidal sadism that are celebrated as a religious sacrament by a death cult. Our streets have been filled with people literally tripping over themselves in their eagerness to demonstrate that they cannot distinguish between those who intentionally kill babies and those who inadvertently kill them, having taken great pains to avoid killing them while defending themselves against the very people who just intentionally tortured and killed innocent men, women, and yes, babies. What Sam Harris is saying here, I believe, is the difference between the journalist that wrote this article and someone who is just looking at the world from an objective perspective. That journalist is saying, well, what Karp is saying and what General Milley is saying and how this event conceptualizes Israel versus Gaza is all a question of the military-industrial complex trying to eat people, destroy them, kill them just to make money. Whereas Sam Harris is saying, wait a second, there is a difference between collateral damage. Karp talked a lot about in the conference how software uniquely can limit collateral damage in a necessary war, and conscious acts of genocidal sadism. That is Hamas burning babies alive in Israel on October 7th, which is a conscious act of genocidal sadism versus Israel defending themselves and then having collateral damage. Now, is everything Israel doing ethical? Of course not. There's nuances to all of this. My point is that there is an objective difference between the two. And the problem with the people protesting, this was Karp's argument on the conference and on the stage, and that's why there was an electric attitude at that conference. People actually listened when Karp talked. He was saying, hey, this difference in views between collateral damage and actual genocide, yeah, that's something that a lot of these college kids don't understand. And as a result of not understanding them, they are defending the very people. They're going through great pains to defend the very people who just tortured and killed innocent people in front of them via whatever religious beliefs or ideological dogmatic beliefs that they have. He continues to say, if you have landed proudly and sanctimoniously on the wrong side of this asymmetry, the vast gulf between savagery and civilization, while marching through the quad of an Ivy League institution wearing yoga pants, I'm not sure it matters that your moral confusion is due to the fact that you just happen to hate Jews. Whether you're an anti-Semite or just an apologist for atrocity is probably immaterial. The crucial point is that you are dangerously confused about the moral norms and political sympathies that make life in this world worth living. I think that quote matters, man. I think that quote really, really matters, and it sums up the broad points I have with this article that I think, Karp would agree with as well, which is that at some point you have to grow up, and at some point you have to start realizing the world is not the fantasy world that you live in. And a lot of the people that want to critique Apple for using child labor, or a lot of the people that want to critique Israel for defending themselves, they are never looking at the nuance of how they got their iPhone or how they get the batteries that are needed in their electric vehicles and the cobalt mining that has to be done in places in Africa just to be able for their very essence of life to be achieved. They don't talk about the people in Brazil that are getting the coffee beans so that they could buy the $7 latte in the morning. And these moral hypocrisies and nuances matter to analyze. What is right, what is wrong is very hard to come to a conclusion to, and you as an individual person have to have some subjective understanding about how the world operates. But the very idea that we don't look at those nuances, that we don't look to the fact that there's a difference between collateral damage and then the actual conscious killing of innocent babies just by the very nature that they're Jewish, I think is a grave mistake. And I think this journalist in the article and the way they propose this article conflates the two, and as a result of conflating the two, they really don't answer the crux of what Karp was saying, which is the way we avoid war is by making sure we defend ourselves and, yes, scare the living shit out of the adversaries that feel that it's time to attack, because once they're scared, they don't attack. And the only way they're scared is if they know if they attack that they get hit back. That is what governs society. And as much as we want to say, oh, we can all get along together, look at how China thinks of Taiwan. Look at what Russia did to Ukraine. Look at what Hamas did to Israel. Look at the different beliefs that communist, dictatorial, authoritarian regimes like the CCP have versus the United States. one can make the simple assumption that, okay, these guys just don't believe in free speech. They're never going to believe in free speech. As a result, you will have a clash. And when that clash happens, the question is, how do we minimize the casualties in that clash? But how do we accept the inevitability that different ideologies will clash? And if they do clash, there will be problems. And Karp's argument is, wait a second. And Palantir's argument is, wait a second. The reason there's $100 billion going into defense tech now is because everyone has recognized the genie's out of the bottle. The world is geopolitically diverse. There is not a unilateral globalist approach anymore to the world. Everyone has different opinions, different ideals, which means this whole one worldism of all of us being together, kumbaya, that's gone. And if that's gone, how do you protect yourself and the societal and the societal values, the Western values that actually matter in the world? Probably through software and defense. All right, last thing I want to end it off with is another post that Coach Reb actually shared today. Timely post. Here's the Free Press that shared one of Karp's messages. The Free Press has 250,000 followers. It is a relatively new media publication that's not the New York Times or some of the legacy media publications. The CEO and co-founder of Palantir on his company's unapologetic commitment to Western values. Let's hear Karp end it off.
There are lots of questions about why we are so active in defending the values of the West. Our belief that the West is a superior way to live and our ways of organizing around that are the reason why our products are transformative, the reason why we have the best people in the world, the reason why a Palantir degree, as it were, is much more valuable than an Ivy League degree. Before the Ivy Leagues even, embraced the thin, new, woke religion, otherwise viewed as an intellectual cause, but in fact is a way of organizing things so that the greatest institutions of our time disappear and turn into discriminatory dysfunction. Palantir is a counterexample, and I'm super proud of the results. We are going to continue to execute, especially in the U.S.
I think Karp's argument has been Palantir is a counterexample to the culture that we have going on that produces the types of articles that we just read from The Guardian. And, it's always good to have a different perspective. I'm always open to a bear case on Palantir. I literally interviewed a guy on Sunday who gave a bear case for the valuation, all that stuff. But false claims and framings of Palantir as an evil company without recognizing that the Western values they care about defending are the values that make up the bedrock to a healthy society, a meaningful society, a place where you want to actually live. Because I'm sure this journalist would not want to live in Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, or Palestine. Well, then maybe we should take those values and the comments made from the person trying to defend those values a little bit more seriously. That's it for me. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Thanks for listening. I'll see you guys in the next one.